In our headlines on this Monday, January 6th, here in South Korea. Corruption investigators had earlier sought to entrust police authorities with the execution of the arrest warrant against President Yoon Suk-yeol. But as was the case last Friday, the two sides have agreed to jointly execute the warrant. Meanwhile, the Constitutional Court convened its first meeting of 8 justices ahead of the launch of the impeachment trial against suspended President Yoon Suk-yeol on the 14th of January. That is, next Tuesday. And Foreign Minister Cho Tae-il sat down with visiting U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken here in Seoul on this Monday, as their two governments pledge continued commitment to ties. Corruption investigators and police authorities have agreed to maintain their collaboration in the execution of an arrest warrant against the president. Now, the agreement follows an earlier attempt by the former to entrust the task solely to the police. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon explains.
After backing down from the first attempt to detain President Yoon Suk-yeol last week, and with the arrest warrant being available for just a few more hours, on Monday morning, the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials tried to entrust the police with the execution of the warrant. However, the police declined to take charge.
The Special Investigation Unit received an official directive from the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials at approximately 7 a.m. today regarding the execution of an arrest warrant and a search warrant. After conducting an internal legal review, it was determined that the directive from the CIO could be against the law.
This comes as the CIO, which is currently in charge, admitted that the institution lacks the experience and capacity to carry out arrests compared to the police. However, the legal issue is that the request for the warrant was made by the CIO. Also, according to current laws, the CIO cannot transfer part of its investigative duties to another institution such as the police. All in all, the joint investigation between the CIO and police continues. As for the deadline for the warrant, the CIO will request another one, which is likely going to have an option to extend the deadline past 7 days. With the first one issued already, the CIO doesn't expect an obstacle for the second warrant. And with that, the Joint Investigation Team has now warned the Presidential Security Service that there will be arrests made at the scene if there is interference again during the second arrest attempt. In the meantime, President Yoon's legal team has yet again criticized the CIO's move.
The president's position remains, as has been stated several times, that the very act of the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials investigating the president on charges of treason is inconsistent with the current legal framework. In other words, it is considered an unlawful investigation.
President Yoon's legal team fired back by filing a complaint against 11 key officials involved in the warrant execution process. Oh Dong-un, the chief prosecutor for the CIO, along with Lee Oh-young, the acting police commissioner, were named on the complaint. In addition, military leaders were also listed on it. The legal team said that amid protecting the president from the execution of the, quote, illegal arrest warrant, the Presidential Security Service team's request for backup was ignored, which is an obstruction of responsibility. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And an earlier appeal by the president's defense team against his arrest warrant has been rejected by a local court. Our An Sung-jin has details.
President Yoon Suk-yeol's appeal against his arrest warrant and a search warrant for the presidential residence was dismissed by a court on Sunday. Yoon's legal counsel had mainly challenged 3 aspects of the warrants. First, it argued that the crime of insurrection is not a subject of investigation under the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials, which issued the warrants. The appeal added that the CIO requested the warrants from the Seoul Western District Court, which the appeal claims does not have jurisdiction over the presidential residence. It also added that some provisions of the Criminal Procedure Act are not included on the warrants. However, the Seoul Western District Court, which had issued the warrants, dismissed the appeal. It stated that warrant objections are for when a suspect is already in custody, suggesting that the request is not valid to start off with. Regarding the claim that the CIO does not have the authority to investigate into insurrection, the court claimed that since Yoon is accused of abuse of power, Adding insurrection charges would simply be a related crime. Yoon's legal team had also appealed that the warrants ignore Article 110 of the Criminal Procedure Act, which states that an area that requires military confidentiality cannot be searched. However, the court said that since the warrants are confirming Yoon's whereabouts, Article 110 wouldn't apply. It further said that the Seoul Western District Court is the court with jurisdiction over the presidential residence in Yongsan-gu District. Following the court's decision, Yoon's legal team emphasized that the dismissal of the appeal does not imply that the warrants are valid, and announced that they would file an appeal to the Supreme Court. Yoon also pledged to file charges against more than 100 people, including the head of the CIO, Oh Dong-un, and Deputy Chief of the National Police Agency, Lee Ho-young. Yoon's legal team claims that these officials from the CIO and police broke into a military protection zone and injured Presidential Security Service employees to execute what Yoon's team says is an unconstitutional and illegal arrest warrant. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
In less than 7 hours, an arrest warrant issued against the president comes to an end as protests both for and against his arrest persist near his official residence. For more on this, I have Park Kon-woo standing by on site. Kon-woo, I understand huge crowds are gathered there.
That's true, Sunny. Where I'm standing now is near the presidential residence in Yongsan-gu District, Central Seoul, where protests both for and against President Yoon's arrest are and were taking place. Protesters from both sides have been rallying for 4 consecutive days now since Friday. They have been here day and night despite the cold weather, heavy snowfall over the weekend, and even sudden rain this morning. As weather conditions are getting better than in the morning and following the fact that it's the last day before the expiration of President Yoon's first arrest warrant, it seems more and more people have been gathering at the site compared to the morning protest. Around me, there are hundreds of protesters opposing Yoon's arrest, shouting and holding both Korean and U.S. national flags. But those people are starting to return to their homes now. Those in favor of Yoon's arrest continue their rally since 2 p.m. while playing loud K-pop music through large speakers installed at the site. But those people finished earlier this day at around 4 p.m. Police officials estimated that around 8,500 protesters had gathered at the site as of 10 a.m. on Monday, but there were definitely more people gathered at the site later in the evening.
Right. Kon-woo, I understand there were a few hostile encounters there.
That's also true, Sunny. Police officials said today that there were 4 incidents of attack against police officers occurring during both pro and anti-protest rallies taking place near where I'm standing now over the weekend. The police said they will investigate these by tracking down the offenders and taking legal action to prevent similar cases from occurring. Hundreds of police are present to prevent any physical confrontations, while police buses are partially blocking roads. I heard many honks, especially during the morning rush hour due to traffic jams, though it's been quieter since then. However, we still need to wait and see as Korea is approaching the evening rush hour. Fences are also positioned to separate the opposing groups and haven't witnessed any physical clashes except for some yelling and shouting at each other today. That's all I have for you now. Back to Sunny.
All right, Kon-woo, thank you for that coverage. That was our Park Kon-woo, that is, reporting live from the president's residential neighborhood. Moving to the Constitutional Court now, the 8 justices held their first meeting ahead of the launch of the impeachment trial of President Yoon Suk-yeol next Tuesday, that is January 14th. Our Oh Soo-young reports.
The Constitutional Court has reaffirmed its plans to swiftly conduct the impeachment trial hearings for President Yoon Suk-yeol, despite procedural issues raised by his team. In a briefing Monday, Press Officer Chun Jae-yeon said that the court's judicial bench held their first meeting earlier in the day as an 8-member panel and shared views on preparatory procedures for the president's trial.
The 8 justices unanimously reaffirmed the decision to hold impeachment trial hearings every Tuesday and Thursday, and to conduct deliberation sessions once a week. The commitment to conducting a swift and fair trial remains unchanged.
The timeline puts significant pressure on the president. If Yoon skips the first trial hearing, then the court would have to reschedule the session. But the second absence means that the panel can proceed without him.
Yoon's legal team has been accused of employing delaying tactics as the president refused to accept delivery of court documents and did not submit sufficient materials during the first 2 preparatory hearings. following the court scheduling of 5 trial hearing dates beginning next Tuesday without a third preparatory session. Yoon's team has complained that the unilateral announcement violates legal procedures, as criminal procedure rules, which apply to impeachment cases, states that defense counsels must be consulted upon arranging multiple trial dates at once. To this, the court's press officer said the 5 hearings were designated by the bench to facilitate the parties' trial preparation plans and ensure a smooth procedural process, citing the Constitutional Court Act and Constitutional Court rules instead of the criminal procedural law. Yoon's team has also contested the main grounds for impeachment. The National Assembly last week stated it would no longer argue whether the martial law declaration constitutes insurrection under criminal law. Eliminating the process of calling in related witnesses would streamline the trial proceedings and therefore speed up the ruling. The president's lawyers say this defeats the purpose of holding the trial, as the National Assembly's impeachment resolution cites insurrection as a reason for removing Yoon from office. The court says modifying the impeachment charges isn't covered by explicit provisions and that the matter is for the bench to decide. It also denied it recommended to the National Assembly to retract insurrection charges from its list of impeachment grounds. Furthermore, amid political clashes over acting President Choi Sang-mok's move to fill 2 out of 3 court vacancies, leaving the remaining justice for bipartisan agreement, the opposition party has filed to dispute his decision. While an 8-member panel is enough to deliberate on and vote for impeachment, the same number as when former President Park Geun-hye was impeached in 2017, the opposition has been piling on the pressure to fill the last spot to increase the likelihood of an impeachment verdict. The court said the trial hearing on the matter would take place on January 22nd. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, bitter bickering resumes at the parliament as lawmakers lock horns over the attempt to arrest the president and more. Our National Assembly correspondent Lee Si-hoo reports.
On Monday, the National Assembly's rival parties, which had refrained from political strife the previous week during the national mourning period, upped their levels of criticism against each other, especially regarding the execution of arrest against President Yoon. Around 30 ruling People Power Party lawmakers gathered in front of the president's residence in Yongsan-gu district in central Seoul on Monday to prevent his potential arrest on the last day of the warrant's validity. The party leadership too denounced the main opposition Democratic Party for falsely accusing the government and the ruling party of instigating insurrection and using the accusation to achieve political objectives. They also urged the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials and the police to stop going along with the DP's push for the arrest.
The CIO is pushing ahead with the arrest execution without a legal basis to investigate charges of insurrection. The CIO need not be fooled by the Democratic Party's political instigation, but conduct investigations within the boundaries of law.
This as the party members continued protests at the Constitutional Court of Korea and the National Police Agency throughout the day, demanding that the court deliver a fair judgment and the police abide by the law. The DP, on the other hand, strongly criticized the Presidential Security Service for impeding the arrest and the CIO for its, quote, incompetency. It also urged acting President Choi Sang-mok to take immediate action.
Acting President Choi Sang-mok should immediately dismiss the Presidential Security Service's chief, vice chief, and the head of its protection bureau. If no action is taken, we will deem it as his will to collaborate with Yoon, the chief conspirator of insurrection.
The party is also pushing for a speedy revote of special prosecution bills against President Yoon Suk-yeol and First Lady Kim Gun-hee, recently rejected by acting President Choi and returned to the National Assembly. It's requested National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik to schedule multiple plenary sessions this week, while the ruling party argues just one is enough. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
North Korea launched an intermediate-range ballistic missile toward the East Sea today. According to South Korea's military, the missile was fired from the Pyongyang area at around noon on this Monday and flew some 1,100 kilometers. Now, this latest launch marks the regime's first for the new year and also comes 2 weeks before U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration. The last time North Korea fired missiles was back in November last year, just ahead of the U.S. presidential election. And in response, top diplomats of Seoul and Washington denounced Pyongyang's latest display of defiance at a press conference here following bilateral talks. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji has more.
With just around 2 weeks left before his term ends, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has made his final visit to South Korea. Sitting down for talks with the South Korean Foreign Minister gov't, the two sides reaffirmed that the alliance remains strong, despite the political uncertainty.
Today, we reaffirm that there are no gaps in the alliance between South Korea and the United States. I have made it clear that under the leadership of Acting President Choi Sang-mok, we will continue to implement our foreign policy based on stable national governance and a strong ROK-US alliance.
When asked about whether the South Korean government is communicating with Trump's team, the foreign minister said there will be no changes to the alliance, regardless of who takes office in either the U.S. or South Korea. He said even when the new Trump administration comes into power, policies will be closely coordinated based on shared values. Blinken also stressed that the alliance remains more essential than ever and addressed threats from North Korea. He said the two countries condemned the North's latest missile launch, saying this is yet another violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions, and added that South Korea, the US, and Japan are exchanging real-time data about the regime's ballistic missile launches. He also expressed concerns about military cooperation between North Korea and Russia, calling it a two-way street.
The DPRK is already receiving Russian military equipment and training. Now, we have reason to believe that Moscow intends to share advanced space and satellite technology with Pyongyang, and that Putin may be close to reversing a decades-long policy by Russia and accepting DPRK's nuclear weapons program.
Earlier in the day, Blinken also met with the country's acting president, Choi Sang-mok. In a closed-door meeting, the top American diplomat said he has complete confidence in Choi's leadership, and that Washington's commitment toward defending South Korea remains strong. Blinken is set to travel to Tokyo after wrapping up his trip to Seoul. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
And South Korean ministries will work together to ensure a smooth transition into a new trade environment under the incoming Trump administration. Intentions to this end were shared by Acting President Choi Sang-mok on this Monday at the first weekly roundtable on international economic affairs. Attended by the heads of the Finance, Industry and Foreign Affairs ministries, the meeting was convened to address trade uncertainties amid the launch of a second Trump administration on January 20th. Choi pledged the government will mobilize all available resources to engage with the new U.S. administration, emphasizing the commitment to a stable economy. In other news, most of the remains of the victims of Korea's worst air disaster in decades have been returned to their family members for a final farewell following the tragic plane crash late last month at Muan International Airport. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
1 week after the deadly Jeju Air passenger plane crash that killed scores of people, most of the victims have now been returned to their families. According to authorities, 176 out of 179 victims have been returned, with funerals set to conclude over the next few days. The remaining 3 victims will be returned to their families on Monday due to personal reasons. With search and recovery work at the site of the accident concluding after 3 phases, authorities have recovered approximately 800 personal items. Of them, 204 items were returned to the bereaved families, while the remaining items will be available for families to check and recover themselves. In the case of electronic devices like cell phones, authorities plan to conduct digital forensics in order to return them. While most of the emergency shelters used by the families at the Muan International Airport is being removed, the joint memorial set up on the first floor of the airport will remain in place for 49 days, in line with Buddhist traditions and at the request of the bereaved families. Meanwhile, the flight data recorder from the ill-fated plane has been sent to the U.S. for analysis. South Korea's Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport announced that the data extraction for the FDR cannot be performed in South Korea due to a missing connector, and it was sent to the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board earlier Monday morning. 2 investigators from the Aviation and Railway Accident Investigation Board will also leave for the U.S. to jointly conduct the investigation. The Transport Ministry on Saturday announced that it had concluded work on the transcript of the cockpit voice recorder containing the final 2 hours of the flight, but said it could not yet disclose the contents. 이승재, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. We begin with the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict. Hamas, the Palestinian armed faction, has appeared to express willingness to release hostages in line with Israel's demands. According to Reuters, a Hamas official stated on Sunday local time that the group had approved a list of 34 hostages proposed by Israel. However, the official said that the agreement's success hinges on whether Israel agrees to withdraw its military forces from the Gaza Strip and commit to a permanent ceasefire. In response, the Israeli Prime Minister's office issued a statement saying Hamas has yet to provide a list of hostages. On December 31st, Israel had requested the release of 34 hostages as a first step if a ceasefire was established. Hamas countered by proposing to return 22 surviving hostages and the remains of 12 deceased individuals. Israel rejected this offer at the time. New York City has implemented its controversial congestion pricing system, becoming the first U.S. city to impose such charges. Starting Sunday local time, drivers entering Manhattan's central business district will need to pay a fee of $9 per day for standard vehicles. The toll varies depending on the type of vehicle and the time of day. The initiative aims to reduce traffic congestion in the city center and address the Metropolitan Transportation Authority's financial struggles. However, it has faced significant opposition, including from prominent New Yorkers such as President-elect Donald Trump. Critics also argue that while the toll may not significantly ease traffic congestion, it could impose an undue financial burden on drivers. Over in Tokyo, in the early hours of Sunday at Toyosu Market's first tuna auction of the year, a 276-kilogram bluefin tuna fetched 207 million yen, approximately $1.3 million. This winning bid marks the second highest price recorded since auction records began in 1999 and is nearly double last year's top bid of 114.2 million yen. The all-time highest price was set in 2019 at 333.6 million yen, or about $2.1 million. A representative of the company with the winning bid said that tuna is a symbol of good fortune, and he participated in the auction with the hope of bringing smiles to everyone through food. The world's oldest living person has been identified as a Brazilian Catholic nun. On Sunday local time, the longevity research organization Gerontology Research Group announced that Sister Ina Canabaro had reached 116 years and 211 days, making her the oldest living person in the world. This comes after the passing of the previous record holder, Japan's Tomiko Itooka, who died in late December last year at the age of 116. Born on June 8, 1908, Sister Canabaro resides in the Teresa Sisters Convent in Porto Alegre. She attributes her health and longevity to her faith and a positive mindset. She is a passionate fan of local soccer team, AC Internacional, who celebrated her birthday by gifting her a personalized team jersey. Yoon Se-young, Arirang News.
In Seoul, it is expected to plummet to -6 degrees Celsius both tomorrow and Wednesday morning and to -12 degrees on Thursday. Cold wave advisories were issued as of 10 a.m. this morning in Gangwon-do province and northeastern parts of Gyeonggi-do province, as temperatures are forecast to drop to below -12 degrees in the morning tomorrow and also Wednesday. Meanwhile, heavy snow is expected in the southwest, along with fierce cold spell. As for the amount of snowfall, more than 20 centimeters of snow is expected in Jeollabuk-do province, more than 15 centimeters in Gwangju and Jeollanam-do province until Wednesday. This heavy snow will continue weak and strong until the second half of the week. Tomorrow, most areas will start at below 0 degrees. Highs will move up to 1 degree in Seoul, 4 degrees in Gwangju and Gyeongju. The coldest cold wave this winter will come around on Thursday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session. Do stay with us.